Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pure Cringe. I'm your host, Maria McQuaid, and today's episode is a Bravo Book Club edition. We are going to be reviewing Tim Gunn, The Natty Professor, a masterclass on mentoring, motivating, and make it work. We're going to be talking about the book, Tim Gunn himself, his career, his origin story, and if that sounds good to you, just stick around. All right, friends, let's jump right in. Today is a Bravo Book Club edition, and my hope is that you'll enjoy this new format. What I'd love to do is to treat this like a book club and to share my thoughts and hopefully allow some space and time for you to think about what you're interested in. And if you've hopefully read the book, maybe thinking about how it made you feel and some thoughts you had. And if you haven't read the book, hopefully it will pique your interest and it'll get you right down to your local library or to Barnes& and Noble or to, heaven forbid, a big box store or Amazon. So I will say I was excited to get started on this because I've always felt an affinity for Tim Gunn. I've always felt like Tim was a really cool part of Project Runway. Of course, we've been doing a rewatch of Project Runway this year, and it's been super fun. And falling back in love with Tim Gunn has been a big part of it for me. So, a little bit about the author. So, we'll start with learning a little bit about Tim Gunn. We'll talk about the book, and then we'll dive into some of the content. Timothy Mackenzie Gunn was born on July 29th, 1953. He's an American author, academic, and television personality. He was on the faculty of Parsons School of Design from 1982 to 2007 and was chair of fashion design at the school from August 2000 to March 2007, after which he joins Liz Claiborne, which is now Kate Spade and Company, as its chief creative officer. And for over 16 seasons, Tim was very well known, of course, as we know him, as the mentor to designers on the reality show Project Runway. So his popularity there is basically what creates his further career, two spin-offs, Bravo's Tim Gunn's Guide to Style, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, and Lifetime's Under the Gun, as well as 5 books. In addition to being an executive producer on that show, he's also served as a mentor for the teen designers on Project Runway Junior, and he provides the voice of Bailiwick, who was the castle steward in the Disney Junior show Sophia the First, and he actually narrated the sitcom Mixology. And I will say the format that I used to consume this book was Audible. And I really felt like it was such a treat to listen to Tim tell his own story in his own voice. So that was super fun. So that's the information about Tim. Now about the book. And I will tell you all, I had no idea how old the book was until I bought it. It was actually published 10 years ago. So March 24th, 2015. And I would describe the book as a mix of how to be an amazing mentor and teacher and a memoir. And so I thought it was really fun and interesting from that perspective. It's comes from a very different place and it's very timeless in terms of the lessons on mentorship and teaching and learning. Let's just dive in. So we've talked about Tim. I gave you the information about the book. I did tell you the narrator is Tim himself. I will say that many of you know that I tend to speed books up when I listen to them. This is a situation where I didn't want to speed him up too much because I really like the sound of his voice. So the speed that I listened to this book on was 1.25, which is a little bit slower than I would normally listen. I would probably listen somewhere around 1.35, and if the person spoke really slowly, maybe 1.4. So let's start to talk a little bit about the content. And what I really loved about this book was that Tim, right from the beginning, says that he wants to start a national conversation about teaching. And I'm not sure how many of you know this or not, but I'm an educator. I've worked in adult learning for over 20 years now. And so this was a great conversation to be a part of with Tim. And I really did feel like because it was an audiobook, that he was speaking directly to me. And it really did feel like a conversation. He talks really early on about his stage fright as a young teacher. And it's funny, I can't actually relate to that, although I know a lot of my counterparts and I know a lot of people that I've worked with personally can. I think it's because as a very young girl, I spent a lot of time on stage. My mother was the kind of person that dragged me to tap, jazz, ballet. I had piano lessons. It was that kind of existence. So I felt like I was probably constantly in front of people. And I can't say that I haven't been nervous when I've presented, especially things that are really important, especially things like something to a huge audience or something that I would consider a really important session. I'll have some nerves beforehand. But when he really talks about that, it reminded me of a really old Seinfeld TV show clip where Jerry Seinfeld actually is doing a stand-up bit. And he actually talks about the fear of public speaking. And he said that there are so many people who are so afraid of public speaking that they would rather die than speak, which blows me away, especially because it is my job. However, what I found really funny was his response, which was what that meant to him was if you were at a funeral, you would rather be in the box than the person giving the eulogy. And it made me think of that when I heard Tim talk about his stage fright. There's so many moments here where he is vulnerable and shares so many deep and personal details. And there are so many times too where he's witty and charming. And I think that's what I would even just say about the book overall is I found the book really smart and charming, which is how I see Tim Gunn himself. Of course, there's always an acronym. It wouldn't be a self-help book if there wasn't some kind of fun acronym, but his is actually meaning something here. So I hope I don't come off sounding flip because of course I really do respect Tim Gunn and his work. So he uses the teach, Teach format. T is for truth telling, E is for empathy, A is for asking, C is for cheerleading, and H is for hoping for the best. I found this framework really cool and interesting to listen to. I also loved the format where the chapters have letters from people that are talking about their favorite teachers. It was usually at the end of every chapter. It was really cool. They're read by Tim, of course, but they are people who have written into him that are talking about their favorite teacher. And it made me start to think about who my favorite teachers were. And for some reason, even though he was not a teacher, I instantly thought of Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society. And I feel like Tim Gunn has that same vibe, right? He is inspirational, smart, motivational, fun. He does have that sort of Pied Piper element where you want to listen to him, you want to listen to what he says. His advice means something. So I feel like this book brought up a lot for me. And I'm curious for you guys that are listening, who was your favorite teacher? Really think about that. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Who was your favorite teacher and what subject did they teach and how did they make you feel? Just think about that. I'd love to hear who your favorite teacher was. If you can, head over to the Instagram post that is associated with this episode and just let us know who your teacher was. Just put their name and what subject. My teacher was Mrs. Allenberg. She was my freshman and high school English teacher. Went to a very small all-girls school wearing a lot of plaid. I'm sure you can get the vibe. And I loved this teacher. She was an English literature teacher, and she made me feel like I could write. I felt like I was maybe special because I could understand literature in a way that maybe I might have been at that time beyond my years. So she bolstered my confidence and made me feel great about school. And of course, that makes a huge difference when you're a kid. Actually, frankly, having someone who's interested in you and your trajectory and your development at any age in any role, it's so important. And so I think that was what I also thought was crazy valuable about reading this book was Tim does talk a little bit about how he struggles to make the transition from teacher to mentor, the difference between telling someone what they should do versus guiding someone, right? The difference between telling and coaching. So I thought that was super fascinating, especially because in the work that I do, that's a big part of what I'm doing on a daily basis is getting people to take things from a coaching perspective and being able to say to someone, what's the one thing that I could teach you or help you with that would really make a difference for you, that could really boost or bolster your confidence. So it was cool to see this other level of vulnerability for Tim as he starts to transition. He's had so many different roles in his life, and that was what was cool about this too, was really learning a lot about his life and the ways that his career has shifted. But he gives great advice. He talks a lot about giving feedback and feedback peer to peer. Again, huge part of the work that I do. So loved hearing that sort of reinforcement of that. I will say there are these great moments of humor where he was talking about how he was not invited to the Met Gala because Anna Wintour hates him, and he gives zero fucks, as of course you would imagine that he would. I loved even hearing about the struggles that he had when he first took over at Parsons. Some of the students revolt when he changes the curriculum and they try to get him fired. Somebody puts a black bunny in his office. It's crazy. There's so much here, so many great nuggets of information. And friends, this is a really short book. This book is less than 300 pages. So it's just jam-packed and it moves really fast, especially when you're listening to it. And I think one of my favorite lessons in the book is that you can't want something for someone more than they want it for themselves. And I think that was something that he struggled with. And I myself, and maybe some of you who might also be in the education field or even as parents, sometimes it's hard because you find yourself wanting something for someone and you see their potential. And so you want to help them and you want to get them to a place of development or a place of expanding their skills. And sometimes people just don't want that. And so his discussion around that I thought was really helpful and cool too. So I hope that was something that you all liked as well. He talks about how, as a teenager, he really was struggling with his mental health and he tried to kill himself as a teenager and was in a facility for over 2 years. So I can only imagine how that also shaped the person that he is today. And the way that he tries to connect with other people is through mentorship and is through that sort of deep, profound connection of education and knowledge. I think that's also probably a safe way to connect too. So I thought that was really interesting and brave of him to talk about. And he was very candid with it. So I will say that if any of you might be triggered by that, I wouldn't say it's graphic, but just so that there is a small part of the book where he does discuss that. Now, friends, you know, it wouldn't be me if I didn't try to Monday morning quarterback something. So that's what I'm going to call this little category here, which is I want to talk a little bit about what I would do, not to really change the book because I think the content is excellent, but what else I think should be going on in the book or how we should be looking at it. And so for this section, I don't have a lot that I would change because I think the book is excellent. I think it's really well done. It's an incredibly concise book. Like I said, there's really not a lot of fat. So you move really quickly from subject to subject, and it really does suck you in, especially if you're already a fan of Tim Gunn, right? If you're not a fan of Tim Gunn, I feel like if you listen to it, you'll fall in love with him. He is so witty and he is so charming. But I do wish that this book had another component. And maybe this is something that could have taken place in the book in and of itself, or maybe this is something that could have been a companion, like a workbook, because there are so many great lessons inside this book. There are so many moments where Tim is talking about a lesson, a small piece of advice, an experience he had that I think if it were in a workbook and the workbook said, for the next 2 weeks, spend time giving feedback to peers, or for the next 2 weeks, look for something positive to say to almost everyone you work with. So I hope that makes sense. I'm thinking a workbook that could be a companion to the book, that would have prompts that would really lead us to experience some of the ideas, some of the advice, and really be able to put them into practice in our own lives. So that is the only thing I think I would change or add about the book. Otherwise, I think it's really good. Something I'd want to mention too is that just in general, there's things that you can pair with a book, right? I always think to myself, like, what would be a good pairing with this book? And I think that it would be super fun to also, after listening to the book, watch season 1 of Tim Gunn's Guide to Style. So, as I mentioned before, Tim's had two spin-off TV shows. Tim Gunn's Guide to Style is actually excellent. I actually own both seasons. The first season is key because it has Veronica Webb as Tim's sidekick. They're very mod squatty and it's really cute. They basically go and they meet with women who are struggling with their style and they perform a makeover, but it's very different. So, what happens first is that Veronica goes with them to their home and she checks the underwear drawer. And I think that all of us would have a heart attack, or as we would have said in the 80s, a cow, if someone came into our house and wanted to look at our underwear drawer and show it to TV cameras. Folks would let them do that, and then they would actually go shopping for foundation garments, which, of course, super important. After that, there would be some opportunity to meet with Tim, and he would share his checklist of basics that you should have in your wardrobe. They would go through that person's wardrobe. They would get them really invested in new styles and being able to shop for themselves. And then they would support that person actually in the department store while they shopped. So all of a sudden, you would turn around and Tim and Veronica would be popping up out of nowhere, pulling the inappropriate garment right from the contestant's hand. And so it was really fun and it was really informative because Tim talked a lot about why certain pieces were classics, why you would want them in your wardrobe, etc. So it was really great. And at the end, what would happen is there was, of course, the makeup and hair, complete makeover, and usually really tastefully done. And then what I thought was a really nice touch, and of course, who knows, maybe indicative of Tim Gunn himself, there would be a gift. So I remember there was one woman who got a beautiful ring, another woman who got a beautiful purse, one got a necklace. Just these nice gifts to usher them into their new lives. And then the culmination of each episode would be an amazingly cute fashion show for the contestant in front of their friends and family. And usually there was just incredible amounts of emotion because 9 times out of 10, it was a situation where that person had been nominated by many people in their lives for the style makeover. And so people were thrilled to be able to see somebody change their lives, empower themselves, and in some cases, for the first time in a long time, really feel good about themselves. So I can't recommend the show enough. It's a ton of fun. Tim is his witty and amazing self. And don't think he doesn't push back with some of these folks. He does. And of course, Veronica Webb, as a former supermodel, you can't ask for more. Tim Gunn in an actual supermodel, it's heaven. It's heaven. Now, season 2 isn't terrible, but Veronica Webb is no longer there. And she's actually replaced by a woman. She is a designer. And so it is a kind of an interesting spin because what she will do is instead of getting rid of some of the clothes that people have that just aren't suiting them, she'll tailor them. So I like to call it pretty in pinking. If you are familiar with the movie and how Molly Ringwald's character completely reconfigures a prom dress, she'll do things like that. So she'll change the dress, she'll shorten the hem, she will fix a waist, or she'll add something to it, which is interesting, but I preferred sort of the glamour of the supermodel as the person who is helping you get dressed, learn how to walk, all of that. So both seasons are excellent. Totally recommend them. And I think they would be a fantastic pairing along with this book. So listen to the book or read the book first, and maybe create your own workbook, right? Maybe you get a fun little notebook and you listen to the book or read it, and you start giving yourself some prompts. You start pushing yourself to take in and internalize some of this advice and use it in your own life. So, my hope is that you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed listening to this book. I will say, out of a 5-star rating, I would give this 4.5 stars. It's not Shakespeare, but it's pretty close. It was a fun read, an educational read, and a really smart read. I feel better, and I feel like I'm a better person after having read it. And so, what more can we ask for? So, of course, this isn't the way it always is with Bravo Books. Let's not get our hopes up that our next book will be quite as full of actual advice, because our next book is going to be Heidi Klum's Body of Knowledge. So, if you're interested, get a copy at the library, buy a copy, listen to the book, and then join me for our next Bravo Book Club where we'll discuss it. I'll look forward to seeing you all then. Bye, everybody.